Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward. Tonight we have photographer Mark Walton with us.
Yeah, Mark's the editor for the Foto Review magazine, a beautiful publication featuring photographers, local and a little beyond. He also runs the Foto Recollective events, which support photographers as a place to share ideas and get their work out there. He's also an archivist for the works of Stan Rosenthall, which I'm really excited to talk to him about. Welcome to Bonn Park. We're happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. We're sorry we mixed up the address.
That's okay. I'm here now, and that's what's important, and thanks for inviting me.
We just had the pleasure of looking at some old antique cameras with you, and I'm so grateful that you showed me how to use some of mine, and now I feel inspired to take on some shooting with some of these cameras
Just
here.
go pick up some film, load them up, and have at it.
I'll do it. What's the name of this one again? The Graphics?
The Super Graphic.
The Super Graphic. That's one of the most beautiful pieces of machinery I've ever seen in my life.
It's beautiful.
It is. I'm very interested to find out how you and Marshall met each other.
We met at the Button Factory, and I don't know if it was for my show or if it was before that. I had a show back in 2010, I believe. And I think I met you there. And Marshall had come over to just look around, and he really liked my work. And so we just got to talking, and he did an interview for my show. It was for a newspaper piece. And it just went from there. And then he and I had some other adventures after that, which are kind of fun to talk about, which I'm sure we'll get to.
I have no memory of how we met. I didn't know.
No,
This is why
No,
I ask.
I thought maybe your partner, Lisa, had introduced us.
it's possible.
Yeah.
She may have, but I think she probably introduced us at the Button Factory because she was working out of there at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I do remember your exhibition.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that exhibition too.
Sure.
Yeah, can we start off with that?
Of course.
Okay. And again, I'm not sure if I remember this correctly. Was the exhibition titled Shift?
It was called Shift, yes.
Okay. And that exhibition, I've told this countless times to people, that exhibition and those photographs changed the way I think about architecture, the passage of time, and how everything around us is constantly changing. I'm just paraphrasing your artist statement basically,
Yeah.
but shifting around us. I remember you photographed Empire Theaters, which is now Landmark
Yes.
Cinemas, and I remember reading your artist statement and how, it's brand spanking new theater when you photographed it, but from that very moment, that building physically changed.
Exactly.
Just the way everything around us, ourselves, our bodies, our friendships, our relationships, society, our community is shifting, but it's not detectable to us in the moment, and only with the passage of time can you see it. And along with that, that photograph of Landmark Cinemas were others like Waterloo Music in Uptown Waterloo,
Yep.
and much older buildings too. How'd I do?
You did really well.
Yeah.
You remembered them quite well. The interesting thing about cameras is that they're so quick. I mean, everything that you're looking at that is a photo was literally 1/60th of a second in time. That's it. So obviously everything does age past that, right? And you're looking just at a little slice. So it's always interesting to go back, and especially, and I'm sure we'll talk about the work that I've got in the magazine, you can go back, 50, 60, 70 years and get these little slices, which just blow you away. You can just lose yourself in these images, just in the mundane things, like
I
what
love
people
that,
are
yeah.
wearing or what's in the storefront window, things like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was trying to capture, certainly with Waterloo Music. I believe it was just the sign in the building. And I knew that was going to go because they moved out of there shortly after. And with the Empire Theater, they had just opened it, and it was like basically it was a desert all around it. There was nothing else around there. And I had seen it one night in a snowstorm, and it was just beautiful, all the snow blowing across with the lights, and there was nothing to block it. And I literally waited for the next storm, and I had my camera ready. And the minute the next storm hit, I went out to go and shoot that picture. I knew in my head that I wanted to take it because I knew that you would never get that viewpoint of it again.
I absolutely love that perspective, because not everyone would take that time and take that care to make sure that all of the pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and you could capture it in the way that you wanted to show it to the world as it was in that moment.
It can be really fun to do it that way, but it can also be a bit of a wet blanket.
For sure.
Because I find myself now, as I've gone forward in my photography career, I'm much more critical and picky about what I want to go out and shoot. So I find I don't shoot nearly as often.
Right.
Because I want it to be one of those special moments. And you can't have special moments like that all the time, right?
You can't be running at a 10 every moment of your life.
That's right.
Yeah.
But because you've had success doing it at one point, you kind of want them all to be like that. So you do sort of self-censor yourself as to what you want to go out and shoot.
Right.
And again, that can be a little bit detrimental because I find I don't take the camera out nearly as much as I used to. But by the same token, I'm taking better photos too.
Right.
So
I think about how if you hadn't captured Landmark Cinemas in that moment, who else did, in terms of, I'm sure people took pictures of it, like people who were responsible for putting it up, and the boardwalk people, but it would have been photographed in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I also think about how something like my father worked at Labatt's Brewery for 30 plus years and try to find photos of Labatt's Brewery. Like, just for whatever reason, these places played a huge role in our communities. People, for whatever reason, just didn't take pictures of them.
Because it was so everyday. So
it was mundane.
Mundane,
yeah.
exactly.
And they had better things to worry about, feeding kids and, getting back to work and all of those types of things that were so forefront for families at that time, right?
Yep, exactly.
You took pictures of what paid, probably, not what you felt might be cool later and might be archival in an artistic way later. I've been trying to find pictures of the Dow Brewery from downtown Kitchener.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody seen one?
No.
They made a bad batch of beer sometime in the 60s, and some people unfortunately passed away. Can't find a photo of this place.
Goodness.
Yeah.
I think about that photo you took of Waterloo Music and how the brickwork is incredible, the colors in that, and how it must have looked very different when it first was
When I
built.
saw that, I took that picture shortly after I moved here. And I immediately saw in that photo, you can actually see there's the front, the doorway, and the brick is sort of outlines the doorway like with a semicircle around it. And then there's all this brick. And I kind of had in my head, with the word Waterloo Music, I kind of had in my head an image of that picture of John Lennon that was taken by Stuart Sutcliffe for the rock and roll.
I know it, yeah.
Yeah, great photo. Yeah.
And so in my head, I could sort of see the resemblance to that shot. I think when I was doing my original photography, like those things were probably 2005, 2006, and then around there, I was trying to emulate all the great photos that I had seen before just to learn how to capture them.
Right.
And by doing that, I sort of developed my own voice because I tried all different types of styles until something that just clicked, right?
That's how we copy a little bit, we imitate, and that's how we learn. Yeah.
And so, but that particular image had that John Lennon feel to it for me.
I was reading an interview with you. I think it may have been the KW Art Gallery's website, because you remember. And somebody asked you an interesting question. It was, what's the first piece of art you ever remember seeing? And
it would have been if I recall, it was the mural over top of the elevators at the Hudson's Bay Company store in Winnipeg.
that's right. I'm amazed you remembered it.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
it also, it did influence your work.
It influenced my work greatly. It actually led me to create a book called Complicity that I've got done, and I haven't quite put it out yet. That's my next step, is to get it printed and get it out there, but it's finished. And it's basically about my complicity in the cultural genocide. And as a white man, I actually have Aboriginal children. Both people that I married in my life have been Mohawk women.
Right.
So by the very act of me fathering these children, I have pulled them away from their culture. Neither one of them recognizes themselves as being Aboriginal.
Interesting.
So they've pulled themselves away from that culture. And how am I complicit in that?
Wow. Mark, what a crazy, wonderful perspective.
And I realized going back to it, thinking it through, is that it started in Winnipeg and with the Hudson's Bay Company,
Right.
particularly because it was involved with trade with the Aboriginals. The mural depicted this in a very colonialist way, this very bucolic scene of,
course,
everybody
yeah.
getting along well, and
Yeah.
here come the Aboriginals to give you the furs, and you'd give them the goods.
They
and
skipped
there's-
over the whole raping and pillaging
Absolutely,
part. Yeah.
everything was gone, but it was so bucolic.
Yeah.
And in my head as a child, I sort of mixed everything up because behind me were, ladies' fashions as I'm looking at this mural.
For sure.
And so in my head, I put ladies' fashion with Aboriginal art and everything
Very
else.
interesting, yeah.
So the book sort of focuses on the blanket and myths and thoughts about what it means to be Aboriginal, what it means to be Canadian, and specifically from my viewpoint as a white male, okay, in Canada.
Right.
I am a colonialist. I can't help it. I was born
Yep.
that way. And I'm just to talk about my influences and talk about my story. I'm not trying to tell anybody else's story. I'm talking about my story and how it led me to have children who have been pulled away from their culture.
Interesting. And what are the ages of your children?
My children are now 27 and 28.
And so they must be very interested in this project.
They have been,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, one of them is in it rather quite a bit. I've taken photos of him over a number of years, and so
Great.
he's had his photo in there quite a bit, and he loves that. So
What I'm taking away from this is when you're talking about your male white Canadian perspective, that is such an issue in our culture right now. But I hear the language that you're using, and that your interest is in telling the story only from your perspective. You're not preaching or teaching.
No.
You're not blaming or shaming.
I'm trying to take responsibility.
Yeah.
I know that what I was taught was wrong. I did not have the tools as a child to recognize that.
But now, as a grown man,
As a grown
as a
man,
father,
Yes,
and as an artist, you have a
Yes.
voice to use.
exactly.
I love that. Yeah.
And I was very lucky. I had got, again, from the Regional Waterloo Arts Fund, who have been very generous to me. I got a nice grant to put that book together.
Wonderful.
And I also was able to get Shirley Medill, who is the executive director of Kitchener Waterloo Art Gallery, to write the introduction to it, which is a real coup because she is, as far as I'm concerned, the godmother of Canadian photography.
I've always thought of you as an active citizen, not just a resident in this community, and you have a passion for community.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to talk about your new publication.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about
I don't know
that.
if anything exemplifies that more, the way you've brought all these photographers together. I don't know if, I can talk a lot about music scenes, like the Paisley underground music scene with the Go-Go's and the Bangles and all sorts, and the grunge music scene. But I didn't know if photography has scenes, with photographers. But anyways, that's what got me thinking. I was thinking about that when I was reading your new publication.
Getting photographers together is like herding cats. We are all so into ourselves because it's very, one person, right? Like it's just you going out with a camera. That's it. We don't interact.
I'm laughing because when Marshall was talking about community and photographers and you bringing them together, I thought to myself, I am a photographic hermit.
Yeah.
This is my job. This is my life, but I prefer to stay to myself, for myself, and, not have to talk to anybody about it.
And that's photographers in general.
Amazing.
But the whole thing about bringing it together and creating that magazine started, the genesis of it was very selfish.
Right.
Because I had that show at the Button Factory, and I had also done Box 10 before that, and actually sold quite a bit of photography at that. I was being seen as being a photographer who was either up and coming, or they thought that I'd been doing it for years, when in reality I'd only been doing it for a couple of years, and I kind of felt like a fraud. And so what I wanted to do was find mentorship in the community. There were no groups. There was no community. So I said, I got to create a community.
I really want to talk about that. What really struck me in the magazine was talking about the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I had a Bader Meinhof moment because after I read that in your magazine, then I saw it pop up in an email and a newsletter that I get. And then I heard it on another podcast I had been listening to. And I think it's something that we all feel, but we don't really talk about very often. Even when you came into my home tonight and you very comfortably started taking these cameras apart and showing me how they work, I thought to myself, I know nothing. I know nothing about photography. And that imposter syndrome comes right to the forefront of my mind again.
I had a conversation with somebody online today from Poland. It was a photographer, and she basically said, I know nothing about photography. And my response to her was, I've only been doing this for 14, 15 years, which isn't long, but every day, I realize how much I don't know about photography.
Yeah.
You can learn so much about it. And that's why I formed Foto. I wanted to get the people together who could help teach me, and we could all sort of help each other at the same time.
Wonderful.
Not just me. Like, I just wanted to make sure everybody had access to that knowledge base.
So talk to us maybe more about how you do that with Foto.
Well, with Foto, essentially we started it off. It was a group of 6 of us that I pulled from. I grabbed 3 photographers from Kitchener-Waterloo. It was myself, Sean Puckett, who was he was an artist in residence at the city of Kitchener at one point. He's got that nice book of all the portraits. It was 1,000 or 1,500 portraits that he's got in it at City Hall.
Yeah,
there.
you can look at those at City Hall.
Yeah, you can see them there.
Yeah.
And I also had another young guy who unfortunately I haven't seen for a while. And then I had 2 friends. Stan was one of them, who I knew was a photographer. Dmitry Shatrov, who was a friend of mine. I had been working in IT with him, and he actually was a photographer who wound up going to live in Moscow, which is where he was from, and his entire job was just to go and take people out on photo excursions and give them master classes. So whether it was at the foot of Everest or in Myanmar or on Mount Fuji, whatever, he would go and take them and do those sort of master classes. And then I found a young woman out of Ottawa who was 18, 19 at the time and just starting in her in a photography program at University of Ottawa, who I thought just had this amazing eye. And so I just sort of gathered these people together, and with her it was just out of the blue. Like, I just said, hey, you want to join this little thing that I'm doing? Because I like your photography, and I can probably learn from you. And so we put that together. The first fall, I think I pulled this together in 2011 in the spring. That fall we went and did, it was something called Culture Days. And it was put on by the Ontario Arts Council. I think it was done by the Canada Council for the Arts the first year. And it's a day where artists get free run to just have all these exhibitions and things going on in the same day.
Beautiful.
And what we did is we grabbed the community space from the gallery, and we put up some of our work in there. But you had to submit some of your who you were and what you were doing and some photographs, and you submitted that to Canada Council and they put it on the site. Well, darned if they didn't choose us as the first thing that pops up in both digital and new media and in photography, visual arts. So it was just at that point that I realized that we kind of had something, that we had talent among us, and just that I should probably run with it a little bit more. So we started doing some workshops. I eventually brought in Dmitry from Moscow, and we did a lecture in 2012 where we brought out 80 people on a very, very cold, stormy February night. And that sort of just made things explode because people were kind of interested to see this foreign photographer come in and talk about his work. So I kind of drew all the hidden photographers who are quite good but didn't show themselves all that often,
Right.
and they were just interested to see that I had a community. And from that point it just took off. We started doing critique sessions. We did more workshops where we talk about lighting, we'd talk about how to shoot a model, that sort of thing.
It's like basically teaching and sharing
And mentorship. If people needed to learn how to do something, I'd say, well, this person knows how to do that perfectly. You've got to go and sit down and talk with them. So we became this really great networking apparatus.
I love that. And what I'm hearing too is that it's not often that you hear somebody maybe starts a group like this and doesn't feel like the king boss at the top of the pyramid here. Some of your first words there were, I can learn from them and I need mentors also.
Yeah.
As an artist and as a photographer, like you said, you are always continually learning something that you don't know. And I think the key to that is keeping that open mind.
And I find that everybody in the group does that, even the guys who are the senior photographers, the guys that I look up to in the group. We've got one gentleman, Carl Griffiths Fulton, who, he was went to art school in Ireland and went to University of Edinburgh at Napier University and studied photography. His first job, I believe, was at BBC London, so he was staff photographer there, sent all over the world to shoot. Wound up being at the London School of Economics as their photographer, came over here, taught alternative photography. So I really look up to him. There's nothing this guy hasn't done. But he is so willing to teach, and he is so willing, he learns a lot from us too, right? Like he'll take a look at some of our ideas and he'll, say like, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Right.
So it's just this nice group getting together that we all grab something from. We all learn from each other.
I find that so inspiring.
The fact you had 80 people come out
Yeah.
on a cold winter night
Yeah.
must have made for an amazing starting point.
It was fantastic. And that in turn led to, so I did that in 2012 with the 80 people. I think it was 2015 that Communitech and Christie Digital wanted to get together and start a photography festival. And I got wind of it, and I said, no. I'm jumping in on this, and I want to be involved with them because I can bring something to them. I did this before.
Yeah. We're ready. We don't need to plan it. We're ready, right?
We can do this. We can, I can help you out. And so I did jump on it, and I sort of just, it sort of fell to me to do the curatorial work for all of that.
Wonderful.
So I found, whereas the directors as a group decided on the keynote photographer, like the big name. I think the first year we got Barbara Davidson in, who's a double Pulitzer winner. The second year we got Camille Seaman in, who is an ecological she's a storm chaser. She, does all these big trips down to both poles to shoot the icebergs melting. She did that for National Geographic and for all the news magazines. And then the last year that we did it, we had Larry Towell, who is a very big name Canadian photographer. He is, I believe, the only photographer from Canada who has ever made it into the Magnum Collective, so Magnum Photography. And that's out of New York, and that was founded by Henri Cartier-Bresson and Robert Capa, among others.
Mark, I'm looking at the cover of your first issue of Photo Review.
Yeah.
Can you describe this cover and tell me what goes into the decision of choosing the cover for this?
That photo was taken by Jennifer King, who's a photographer out of Waterloo. And she just does the most incredible images, period. But she's quite good at doing images that are about her children.
Right.
And she catches them in unguarded moments, and she'll catch them when as the cover of this, she's just ticked off. Or she looks like she's ticked off. Actually, I know the story. She's not really. It's just her. That's just her resting face. So, but I wanted to, when I'm looking for images for a cover or for a magazine, I'm looking for something that's going to draw you in and say, why does she look like that?
Why does she look like that? What's in this magazine?
That's
what
right.
else is there to tell?
And it's drawing me in. And I was actually told by Shirley Medill at KWAG that it was, and Shirley sat on the board of directors for numerous Canadian photography and arts magazines. She said that it was a very courageous choice for a magazine cover because pictures of children don't usually do well on it, and especially
it's not just a picture of a child.
Exactly.
This is special. Yeah,
exactly. But it's very reminiscent of the work of Sally Mann, and it can be seen as being somewhat sexualized. It's not. I mean,
I don't get that. I've felt that from many images of children that I've come across in my lifetime, and especially in my job. But that one doesn't give me that creepy, sexualized
because it's being
feeling.
shot by her mother.
Maybe
I honestly think that that's what it is. She's capturing her in a different. I don't know.
And she's not posing for a stranger. She's not being directed in any way that we know of. That isn't just an innocent mother's love, right? But I didn't get that creepy feeling from this one.
It's interesting. I'm like this. I think that that's the best photo in the whole magazine, personally.
Yeah.
It just like I was just drawn to it the minute I saw it, and there were other great photos too. But I sort of like that challenge of going through things with a curatorial eye and having to really think about what is the most effective photo here? Like what works the best? I love sitting down with a photographer and looking at their contact sheets or looking at their, what they've got in Lightroom or Photoshop and just sort of picking through what the best shot is, because most photographers have a very difficult time self-selecting like their images. It's very
It's
difficult.
an impossible task.
It can be. It can be. So I love doing that. I can pick out, the best shot in 2 seconds flat, whereas they would have, looked at it for 40 minutes and still not got it.
There's so much with any art. I'm sure Marshall can speak to that too, but there's so much loaded inner commentary when you're looking at your own stuff and you're thinking about, how is this going to be perceived? What did I really mean? Could I have done this better? There's so much of that critic going on, but when you're looking at someone else's, you can be completely objective to look at their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, I've always thought some of your portraiture is just hauntingly beautiful, the way you approach it.
Thank you.
How do you approach portraiture?
I look for those really unguarded moments, like when they're not posing for me, like they are, but they're not. They've sort of let themselves go just that split second. And I think that's what I really strive to do, to be able to catch who they really are. It's just like they're not putting on a facade. They are to some extent, because they're sitting in front of the camera and they know that it's there. But they're taking a breath, they're just sort of letting themselves exhale for a second. And so that's when I snap it. It's just they've let their guard down that much.
I don't value many photos about myself, but my favorite photo of me is the one you took of me.
Yeah.
I shared it with Sara a little while
Yeah,
ago.
I
I
saw
was
that,
sitting
yeah.
just before
Great.
an interview.
Yep.
And I didn't know you took that photo till maybe a week later. I think you sent it to me.
The one in Niagara Falls?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that shot here.
And I'm so appreciative that you took that picture.
Well, I'm appreciative that I was there to be able to take it with you, because that was an incredible thing.
Yeah, can we share that story?
I'm so intrigued. Please share.
You
I'm
gotta
ready.
Tell, I was a tag along, so you got to tell the
Tag
story.
along. I want to know everything.
So I had the opportunity for Rock Cellar magazine to go to Fallview Casino in Niagara Falls, into that beautiful ballroom. Do you remember what the ballroom is called?
I can't remember the name
It's
of
a
it.
great little theater, though.
Yeah.
For the kickoff of Ringo Starr's and his all-star band tour that year,
2012. Yeah.
2012. And I don't remember how it was set up, but you were the photographer for it.
Yep.
Must have just chatted with you and said,
Yep.
"Do you want to do this?" And Mark said, "Yeah, I'm in." And we drove, and that's when we really got to spend a bit of time together and talk on the car ride down. And to say it was an interview, it was like I got to ask Ringo Starr a couple questions, and then we got to talk to the all-star band.
The
one-on-one
all-star
for-
band
for
was
5-10 minutes each.
Yeah, that was almost as good as going to Ringo Starr. Okay,
I
as
love
far
this.
as I
I
was
am
concerned.
And Mark
starstruck at
as a
this
photographer,
story.
got to go strip to front. So at this point, we're separated for a while, because I'm standing back at a microphone waiting for my turn among many journalists, music writers, I guess. And you're right up at the front, pretty close, taking just gorgeous, gorgeous photos of Ringo Starr up there, and making the front of the magazine cover.
Yeah.
And then all the ones afterwards of the band. And but you didn't have a lot of space to work with in terms of very limited space. But you pulled off some beautiful photography there.
And it's never easy to shoot concert photography anyways, because the lighting's usually bad. They had a great light show, so we were kind of really lucky with that. And I think they kept the lights up a little bit for us anyways.
Yeah.
But it was probably the apex of my photojournalism career right
Oh,
there.
that's wonderful to hear.
Do you remember looking through your camera at Ringo Starr and thinking,
I'm
This
shooting
is-
Ringo Starr. What the heck is going on?
I'm not sure I'd be able to handle the focus. Like,
Well-
I think I might tear up. I do tear up when I'm very excited about something. It's a sort of happy, sad situation. So I'd be nervous I wouldn't get it.
We got there early in the morning and we had breakfast first, because I think it started at 10 o'clock, some weird hour.
Yeah.
Like, when do rock
I know.
stars get out to do
Yeah.
like a press
Well, if
thing
you're
at
Ringo
10 o'clock?
Ringo Starr, it's whenever you want.
That's right.
yeah.
But we were sitting down in the restaurant at Fallsview, and in the table beside us is Greg Rowley.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting down going,
of Santana and
of
Journey?
Santana and Journey, and this is the guy who sang Black Magic Woman at Woodstock. And I'm just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on in the day, this is Todd Rundgren.
Yeah.
I mean, this is bloody Todd Rundgren,
Yeah.
right? It was
And
just
Steve
amazing.
Lukather of Toto.
Toto, yeah, Lukather, and it was just incredible.
You just awakened a memory of mine. Was I remember one of the best things that Ringo Starr said was somebody asked him about Niagara Falls, staying in Niagara Falls, and where he was staying. He was staying in the penthouse at Fallsview Casino, obviously. And he said, "I open up my my drapes. I look out at the falls, He says, boy, that'll put you in your place.
I love it.
But the other thing I really remember was he talked about how the Beatles never actually saw the Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Like
No, they'd be shuffled around.
they
from
never
place
actually
to
saw it.
place.
So he actually never saw it until he came there for the first time with his all-star band.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, thank you for being a part of that. I didn't know if we'd ever do something again together like that, you know. But
It was a lot of fun. We wound up doing the Winters brothers.
oh yeah, you photographed Johnny Winter.
Johnny Winter
And-
and then Edgar Winter as well.
Yeah, that was awesome. You went down. We weren't together, but you went down and
Yeah.
I did the interviews over the phone,
Yep.
and you went down in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made probably the stupidest mistake I ever could have made as a
Oh, do
photographer in with Johnny Winter, who of course he's got albinism and he's mostly blind, if not completely blind.
Right.
And I asked him a stupid question because here I am, I'm an artist, and as a visual artist, I know that a lot of other visual artists do other things other than paint, like they'll do something else,
Sure.
right? And I asked him, what do you do? Like, do you paint? He's looking at me like, who the hell is this guy? I eat, breathe, drink, sleep, guitar, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's all.
Yeah.
I just felt like this big.
No, I think that was a great question to ask. I find often I got to interview Merle Haggard one time,
Yeah.
and we're talking about trains, and he was pretty good about talking about his music. But my father had a huge train set in my
Yeah.
bedroom, and
Wait, sorry. Your father had a huge train set and it lived in your bedroom?
it was in my bedroom.
Okay.
So it took
Were
up
you
half.
allowed to touch it?
No,
I didn't
it
think
took
so.
it took up half my bedroom. This incredible big N gauge train set, I think. Anyways, I learned that Merle Haggard was a big model train enthusiast, and his dad worked at a railroad. And anyways, it's funny how you can start talking to an artist about something like their hobby or something unrelated to what they're known for, and that's really when the conversation comes alive.
Well, we were also there because he had launched a line of hot sauces, if you recall.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so I didn't want to talk about hot sauce. It's like, because I know nothing about hot sauce. So,
Right,
I know a
yeah.
little bit about art. So
Yeah.
I asked that question. I
Yeah.
just felt like an idiot afterwards.
Johnny Winter is also not the best interview.
No,
No, no.
they were handling him with kid gloves. And that was just before he died.
Yeah, you actually had to go onto his tour bus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't, the Edgar Winter show was just great. I just got to go in. I think we had like 15 minutes, like the first 6 songs or something, or the first 5 songs.
Yeah. Did you get to hear that song Frankenstein? That big wild.
No, I didn't get Frankenstein, but I got I got a couple other hits. So
Okay.
It was good.
That's
I was happy.
This episode of Bonn Park is brought to you by Wordsworth Books, located in the vibrant heart of Uptown Waterloo. Celebrating 35 years, Wordsworth Books remains dedicated to stocking the very best in new Canadian and international fiction, thought-provoking nonfiction, cookbooks, DVDs, and a carefully curated selection of children's picture books and young adult novels. Co-owners Mandy Browse and David Worsley are happy to special order any title you're looking for and pride themselves on being able to obtain the hard to find and the out of print. Along with organizing between 15 and 20 author readings and other events each year, Wordsworth Books supports numerous book clubs for literary fiction, sci-fi and fantasy, mystery, books for babies, and several food-themed reading groups. Support a local gem like Wordsworth Books, which is so much more than just a great bookstore. It's a one-of-a-kind gathering space and a vital part of the region's cultural community. Find Wordsworth Books online at wordsworthbooks.com or on Instagram at @wordsworthbooks. That's WORDSWORTH Books. I'm going to tell you a quick personal story about Wordsworth Books. Last summer, my 11-year-old daughter asked me to order the Divergent series for her by Veronica Roth. And I thought, okay, kid, I'm going to do you one better. I'm actually going to call up Wordsworth Books and see if they can get this in for us. And of course, David said, no problem. We'll call you when it's ready. Well, that call came in a couple days after my mother passed away. Had we ordered those books online, they would have showed up at our door. We would have stayed home. But that day that we got the call that the books were in, we headed uptown to pick them up. We ran into a really close friend out front who gave us the hug that we needed. And then we actually ended up staying uptown for the Buskers Festival. It turned into an experience instead of something that we just ordered. And there's a big difference. And that's why I like to support Wordsworth Books in Waterloo. Not only did they have what we wanted, but they actually ended up giving us what we needed.
Like Sara, lots of time goes by where I don't see you.
Yeah.
I really value greatly that time I got to spend with you and see how you work.
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
And congrats on this magazine.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some of the photographers in there that
Oh sure.
really? I know this may be difficult because you're having to pick and choose a few, but Is there a few that just really stood out for you?
Well, I mean, Stan, of course. I inherited, Stan Rosenthall was a friend of mine who I knew just totally from another business. I was working in the promotional products business. And, you know, he and I got to know each other over the years. I was selling to him, and I knew that he needed some help with his computer. So I went over and decided to go and help him out at his home one day. And I saw this gorgeous photography up on the walls. And so I fixed his computer, got him all set up and ready to go with his email and stuff. And I said, you know, if you've got a print, I'll take a print. And I think he left me with like 12 or 13 prints.
Wow.
And it was just, wow. And I didn't know, because he had never mentioned that he was a photographer before. And this was before.
He never mentioned.
No, he never mentioned it. And I hadn't taken up photography yet.
Okay.
So there was this relationship where I knew of it. I appreciated his photography, but I wasn't there shooting yet. I never owned a camera before.
So maybe explain to us a little bit about who he is and what he did.
Stan Rosenthall, he was born in Montreal in the 30s, early 30s. He grew up orphaned with his brother. His brother raised him, among other family members. He went to high school at West Hill High School in the same grade, the same year as William Shatner. Which is kind of interesting in and of itself.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. And then he went off after high school. He worked at his family's furniture store for a little while, and he had picked up a camera in high school. Somebody, I think an uncle had given him a camera, and he did all the yearbook photography. So after he spent a little time in the family business, he kind of wanted to get out and try a little bit of photography. So he moved to New York, and he wound up becoming an assistant in the darkroom at at the UN first in 1957. So he was getting all these amazing images from photographers around the world that were being sent there to be developed, and he'd do all the developing and do all the printing. So he got, the first Israeli war. He got just amazing images. Then he went on and became a darkroom assistant for Life magazine, where he kind of got into a few kerfuffles with Alfred Eisenstadt, who was the big name in photography at the time. He was Life Photography's biggest photographer. And Eisenstadt had done a photo of John F. Kennedy and his family just after he became president, and asked Stan to do a print. They were doing a print, and he said, I want you to do this print. And Stan did the wrong print because they all look the same. And so, he just didn't. Eisenstadt blew up on him, and Stan just said, I've had enough of this. So he went off to work on his own, and he started shooting for all kinds of different magazines. He shot for Forbes, he shot for Fortune, he shot for Look magazine, and he did a lot of other freelance work for companies, etc., etc. He then went on to become an auto racing photographer, because his other great passion, apart from photography, was auto racing. So he became a fixture on the racing circuit, and actually became quite well known for his photography in the auto racing world. He had been pictured. He became the spokesman for Minolta cameras as a photographer for auto racing. I think he was on the inside cover of Photographic Life or something in 1965 December. And in that same month, that same year, he was also in Car and Driver, where he had a spread of all of his work in the auto racing circuit. So he sort of became very well known for that. Anyways, long story short, he and I got very close. He was 35 years my senior, but we really hit it off. Right. And when I became a photographer, he decided to help me out, giving me a few things here and there where he could help me, like he bought me my first tripod, and he gave me some of his darkroom equipment. And when 2 years before he passed away, he asked me if I would consider being written into his will as being the person responsible for his artistic legacy. Which
what
meant
a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I had at that point, becoming a photographer and having already started Foto and having Stan be part of it, I would bring him in to do lectures at the Button Factory or at different places. He'd come in for the crit sessions we would hold with Foto, and he just loved it. He was just beside himself. He was in his late 70s at the time, and it just animated him. His family said that whole process of rediscovering his work and discovering that passion made his last years just amazing. He just loved
What a
it.
wonderful conclusion to those last years.
Exactly. So he asked me if I would consider being the executor of that part of his estate. And so I inherited the entire collection. And I knew that I had to do something with it to honor him, and it was going to be a book. However, there are 50,000 plus negatives sitting in my basement, and maybe 1,000 prints, and maybe 10,000 slides. And going
You need a
through all
team
these-
is what you need.
You need a team. And so what I decided to do was I figured out if I do a magazine, I can do a small chunk of it.
Yeah.
And so that was the impetus for creating Photo Review.
Well, I love the images that you chose of Stanley's in this magazine. And can you talk a little bit about the race car driver one? That I found that shocking and wonderful. And
I know see which one you're looking at here.
Sorry, maybe is it in this one or is it in the other magazine? This might be my flub with the driver on fire.
He'll be in here, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just sort of. Yeah, the driver on fire. So basically I don't know what race this was at. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the right time, where a car had come in and they were refueling it, and the refilling tank came out and sprayed gas all over this guy, and it caught on fire. So he's got a picture of this guy on fire on the ground,
rolling around,
the car on fire. People are in front of the car, haven't even reacted to it yet because they haven't seen it. And the people in the back are obviously quite aware of what's going on, and they're trying to put the fire out. Anyways, this photograph won an award for him with Look magazine. I can't remember what category or whatever he won it for, but he was very proud of it.
It's like you said, it's one of those moments where you just have to be there.
Yeah.
And there's so much going on. That's an entire story. And I find myself wondering if this poor driver was okay, or sorry, the person working
He
at
said
the pit,
actually
I
that
guess.
the guy, sure, he was burned, but he wasn't bad.
Right.
It wasn't bad at all.
It looks almost abstract in its nature because there's so much fire going on.
Yeah.
Did Stanley talk about that photo? It has it sets itself apart from his entire body of work in some way, or did he not see it that way?
I don't think he saw it that way. Stan just liked, when it came to auto racing, he just liked being there. He would tell me stories about trying to elbow his way in at pit row, after the race had been won and he had to get into the winner's circle. And
Right.
one time he had, before that had happened, during the race, he had fallen down in pit row, and he had pockets full of film, and he bruised the heck out of his legs, and he couldn't move. Like, he was just in so much pain. So he just gave his camera to another photographer who took it into pit row and shot all the shots for him.
Wonderful.
And didn't ask for, they were just the camaraderie. They wouldn't ask to have their name put on the photos. So just like, your camera, okay, I'll take the pictures.
Right.
So he would talk about things more like that, about the process and about the camaraderie among the photographers in the auto racing world.
Isn't that kind of what it's all about? The good old days and what they went through and who
exactly,
you met.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've got a picture of him in the magazine where it shows him actually on pit row with his 3 Nikon Fs, and he just looks like a real mensch.
He just looks like a photography badass, and he's ready to get in there.
Yeah.
And he looks happy.
He is.
He looks
he
really
was always
happy.
happy with photography.
I encourage anyone listening to get the photo review and check this out.
Photo Review. It's at Wordsworth Books. There you go.
There you go.
In Waterloo and online at photo.re/view.
Perfect. Thanks.
I love it.
Mark, I saw some photos in here where the photographer turns the camera on themselves by shooting into the mirror.
Yes.
When did that begin, do you think? Like, I think of that as a very common thing now with technology, and lots of people do it. But when did photographers, do you think, started capturing their own image in a mirror?
Nancy actually, so that was from an article called Manifesto. And I wanted to do something on contemporary female self-portraiture for a long time, based on the work that I had seen. I had mentioned at the beginning of our talk that one of the women that I had be part of the collective was a 19-year-old out of Ottawa. And she did a lot of fashion photography. And she would take the most incredible images of herself with film, okay, not just digital. And I was so impressed by them. And I told her, I one day want to do an article or do a show where it's just work of female photographers turning the camera on themselves, taking the male gaze right out of it.
It is such an important part of what's happening out there that people don't take seriously.
Yeah.
But that is expression. That is an art form. And the fact that this girl in particular, young woman in particular, was shooting it on film, I find incredibly impressive and wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's where this was born out of. But, and I've been collecting, just images from people for years, just wanting to get this done. And it just sort of made sense. It's sort of been sitting around for like 5-6 years and I hadn't done anything with it. And I thought, well, heck, it should go in the first issue of the magazine.
Yeah.
And at least that way I've put it out there. If a show comes out of this or we want to do something further with it, we can, which is great.
And what I find lovely is another young woman might take a look at that, or young man or whoever, and think, oh, you know what? This might be something I'd like to try.
Yeah.
Right? That inspirational part of the magazine.
To do something maybe just a little bit different,
Yeah.
Like that's not your typical selfie or your typical photograph.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got people in here. One of them is just not a photographer at all. She's actually an architect's assistant. And she was actually a model for Marissa, who was the photographer from Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
And she would turn the camera on herself once in a while and just send me the photos so that I could consider them for the issue.
And what was that young lady's name?
Her name's Natalie.
Natalie. Okay.
Yeah. And I've never met them. I never met Natalie. I've met Marissa many times, but then I actually asked Nancy Ford, who's part of the Foto Collective. She hates doing self-portraiture, can't stand it. But she felt that she needed to. One time, there's a photo of her taking a picture of herself in the porthole window of a ship as it crossed into the Arctic Circle. She felt that she had to commemorate that moment somehow because she always wanted to go north of the Arctic Circle
And
on a boat.
this photo is so lovely. It frames itself. It's mirroring itself. There's so much happening in this photo.
Exactly.
She really, really took the time to set that up, or turned around like some of us do and thought, that's the photo.
Exactly.
This is happening now.
I've also got a series of photographs by a woman. She's actually out of New York City. She's a psychologist. And she's in her 60s, and she's been doing self-portraits since she was 50. And she just wants to keep on doing them. And she just tries different ways of capturing herself all the time.
Right.
And she's very, upfront about it. She does them nude. And they're just beautiful photos. Absolutely gorgeous. And you may have missed the first one. She actually caught herself. It's just this tiny little image of her in a mirror in a much broader picture.
My whole family, actually, my daughters are 11 and 13, and my husband's a little older, but we were all looking at that first image in the mirror together, and everyone had such a different perspective of it, but it was all with respect. It was all with a little bit of love for this photo and understanding, like, wow, you don't see this every day. They really did appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm kind of looking for is when I look at images that attract me as something that I haven't seen before.
Right.
And those are the ones that really draw me in, and those are the photographers that I want to get to know.
Oh, definitely.
They're the ones that I can learn from.
You were doing such important work by.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard.
Oh, you really are.
It's just I had a lot of fun putting it together. That's for sure.
I really enjoyed some of those black and whites that you just came past. It reminded me of there's some kind of abstract stuff going on. It reminded me when I used to use a darkroom, and I would put like a goldfish in a bag under on top of the paper, or a handful of marbles of my nephews or something like that. And one of them in there really reminded me of that, and I just found it so heartwarming to see that people are still into that.
Yeah, it's
People
a lot of
still
fun.
want to create. It's not all about the perfect photorealistic photo, like it's not all about the sharp heightened focus.
There's actually a whole series of photos here that are done without a camera.
Yeah.
These are actually called chemograms, and what she does is she takes photochemistry and photo paper, and without not being in a darkroom or anything else, she'll scratch up the paper and add what she calls, I think they're stops to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're resists. She calls them resists.
So this has to do with timing.
So what it does is she will take another chemical. She'll take nail polish and put it on the paper, or she'll take soap and put it on the paper. She'll take cat food and smear it on the paper. And then she puts the photochemicals on it so that it all reacts. resists stop it from reacting or have the photochemicals react in a different way because they're introducing other elements to the process. And so you've got these absolutely completely abstract pieces that do not look like photographs at all, but essentially they're photographs made without a camera.
And they're gorgeous.
And they're so intricate. They are, like, to see one up in person, my wife actually owns that one.
Oh, really?
And to see it up in person, it's just the depth. You can look in one, there's to explain this image, it's like an acrylic painting, but so much more depth to it. You can go down layers and layers and layers and layers and still see more in it. So they're just phenomenal.
This is so interesting because Sara Fleisig is the photographer who, her byline or her identity is the girl who soaks her prints. And she's using like bodily fluids.
Yep.
And it's not for shock value. I don't think it's for reaction. I think she's just genuinely interested in how that's going to react on the paper.
Yep.
And they're beautiful images. And Marshall got to see them in person for the first time. She brought them here.
Yeah, they're incredible. And the fact that she's using something from her own body, her own essence too.
Yep.
I love the word resist.
Yeah.
It really mirrors for me. Well, first of all, those convey a really, for me, a real human emotion when I see those.
Yeah.
And resistance, I think, for humans is one of our biggest enemies, right? Like, we're constantly resisting things as we try to navigate our lives, and it's a perfect word for what she's doing.
And Alina, the photographer, is actually, she's from Waterloo. She's actually Romanian, but she's living in Waterloo. And she's a psychotherapist.
Oh,
so,
wonderful.
yeah, she's really thinking all these things through. Like, there's a lot of thought that goes into all of her work. But these abstracts are just incredible when she does them.
With your body of work of Stanley Rosenthal's, I think this is the most brilliant, perfect way you can move forward with archiving his work.
Yep.
By making a commitment to this magazine.
Yep.
And by bit releasing it, rather than trying to take on some huge daunting task of one book or volume of books. It just which 10 years from now you may feel like that wasn't the right way to do it.
I think that it's exactly the right way to do it, because I think a book would have taken me 5, 6, 7 years to get it so that I was actually comfortable with releasing it.
Right.
In a small chunk, I'm happy with what I put out. I took something that was representative of the whole collection, and I wrote about, just basically talked about his life, didn't talk really a lot about the photography, just explained who he was so that people could understand, where these things came from and who it was who took them. There's all kinds of collections like this out there. They're coming to light where, people die and they find boxes and boxes of their photographs, and people are going through them and just seeing these amazing collections of absolutely beautiful artistry.
That someone had stuffed in their basement or
Yeah,
attic,
exactly.
right?
It's sort of like the Vivian Meyer story, right? She was a photographer, I believe, out of Chicago, who was discovered, 10 years ago? There's been all kinds of documentaries on her work, and it wasn't discovered till after she died. And there's all these archives that are coming to light now, and I just am lucky to be able to have one, and it's from somebody that I knew well.
And what I love about that is you're not just, with a book, you would have a specific audience. With this publication, you might get someone who picks it up for the cover, or who picks it up for one of the other artists and their photographers in there, and then they get the joy of appreciating his work also.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, and that's how they'll get into knowing what he was up to without even really looking for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, that is why I put him. He's the first article in the whole series of magazines. I'm hoping that we've actually, the grant that we got was to do a series of 4, but I know that this is going to go on for years.
I think it will. Yeah.
So
Before you arrived, and I think this is how I think would be a good way to wrap up our interview.
Sure.
Is
I could talk all night though, couldn't you?
I was talking to Sara beforehand about how it appears to me that you, along with your partner Lisa, an artist, she's a founder of Pat the Dog Theater Creation, which kind of mirrors what you do. A lot of ways by supporting
backwards.
playwrights.
I mirror what she does.
Right? But somehow you may be the only couple I know in Waterloo Region who have carved out this amazing life for yourselves as artists on your own terms, it appears. And am I correct in that
I think you're right. I think it's less amazing than it sounds, because it's a lot of hard work for not a lot of money. Lisa's actually full time doing what she does, because she goes after grants in a big way. She's received major grants and funding from Heritage Canada, Canada Council for the Arts, and from Trillium. She does it on a national level. It's going international in a few weeks. We're leaving for Scotland because we're doing an exchange with an art community up in Leith, Scotland, which is as north as you can get in Scotland. And exactly, Foto sort of came about as sort of like a mirror image to what she's doing, but for photographers.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And can you tell everybody where they can find you?
They can find me at photo.re, which is .re, so that's just on the web. They can find me personally on Instagram at mwaltonphoto, and they can contact me at mark@foto.re, foto.re.
So great to reconnect with you.
It is.
Yeah.
I hope that we stay in touch, and maybe we'll have you back whenever you want to talk about the next publication. We'd
Sure.
love to talk to you again.
Yeah, well, we'll be putting out another issue, and it's going to be quarterly, so I'm working on the next one already.
Lots of hard work. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung. Special thanks to our sponsor, Wordsworth Books in Uptown Waterloo.